All right. All right. Sorry, we are a little late, folks. Not by much. Just had a last-minute hiccup for some reason. Let's see. All right, so this is all set. Just let me. Last-minute hiccup. Just let me. Where is? So let me just work out how to get the chat going on my phone, just to see what people say in case. I doubt they will, though. That's fine. The stream should be fine. All right, so I suppose I should give an update for you all, because you don't see me talk very often or make a video. So I've just been busy with uni. My exams are coming up, so I'll be focusing on those pretty much after I'm done with this stuff. I do have another video in the works. It's about the waifu Holocaust. I already have the script ready and done. It's over 7,000 words, so that video is going to take a long time to get finished, and it'll probably be after my exams. But then after my exams, I have Supernova to deal with, so we'll see how that all works out. But so I've got the video in the works, and I will be finishing that up when I have the chance. So today we're going to talk about hello, Shadow. Today we're going to be talking about Dead or Alive 6, specifically about the controversy that has been swelling up in recent days. Shadow, must you be in here doing all this right now? Yeah. So today just remember that everything that I cite here is already in the description. So by all means, when you see this video, which could be after the fact already, yeah, you could just follow all the sources along as I bring them up. The head honcho says, and holy fuck, what a controversy it is. Yep, I agree. It's a fucking doozy. It's not something I wanted to talk about, but since it's here and it's happening, I don't really have a choice on the matter, especially because I do consider myself a fan of the Dead or Alive series. Hold on just a minute. It seems my cat wants to get. Okay, sorry about that. I just had to get my cat out of the room and also get this really fucked up setup I got going on here. All right. So, for those of you who haven't been following the news, I'm just going to give a basic summary of what this article and a similar article, which is this one, just the basic overview of what's happening. So, Koei Tecmo released a trailer for Dead or Alive 6 through IGN. So they put up a trailer and they did an interview with IGN, talking about how Dead or Alive 6 is going to be a new it's a change of direction for them. So originally, the Dead or Alive series was known for not only being a fighting game, but also a game with a lot of female fan service in it. So the core of the series always was about fan service and about fighting, right? Koei Tecmo, specifically the director, Shinbori, I forget his first name, but Shinbori said that now they're going to focus on toning down the fan service of the female characters. And as you can read by this headline, they're toning it down by a lot more than just a little bit. Excuse me, tried to burp. It's much worse than they initially said it was. So the trailer showed Kasumi and Helena in very different outfits, arguably more conservative outfits. Kasumi kind of looks like, what's her name, Phase 4 in DoA 5. So you know the girl with the ninja suit on, is the Kasumi clone. She looks a bit more like that. I think they reduced her breast size, but I can't confirm that. Same with Helena. So they're doing all these things to change the focus from they're changing the focus from having the females be like as sexy as possible, and is more like this is a hardcore fighting game thing. So it's a complete change of direction. And the reason why they changed it, there are several reasons. Like people have given a lot of ideas as to why this is the case as well. And one of them is this article. So one of the things they did to tone down the fan service in Dead or Alive 6 is they removed something called the soft engine, which if you played DoA 5 or DoA Extreme 3, which you can get now via PlayAsia, go to playasia.com and buy it on PS4 or Vita. And basically what it did was it just gave like, better lighting on the girls, better like touch sensitivity on the models. So like their breasts would look a bit more like squishy. Same with their butts and their legs, stuff like that. It's basically just to make someone look really hot. So they've removed that. There are no jiggle physics either, from what I can tell. And based on what Shinbori said, they're changing the DoA girls to be more along the lines of, well, in his words, American comics and American films, which, if you've been following this culture war as much as I have, or as often as I have, you would know that's a really bad sign right away. Absolutely. Fucking crazy bad sign. So we'll see what he says specifically here. So according to Shinbori, the change came amid discussions with fans at EVO 2017. Oh, I'll get to that a bit later, in just a tick. The reference we used for the imagery in DoA 6 comes from American comics and films. In the old days, I loved American comics. Right away, that tells you just how informed Shinbori is about this entire situation with like Comicsgate, or even to some extent Gamergate, and even people's distrust, disinterest, and and dislike of Hollywood in general. Like, this isn't the 1980s or the 1990s anymore. The elite Hollywood class in the United States is seen as one of the most pretentious, the most dogmatic, the most obnoxious, the most arrogant, basically the scummiest people in the entirety of the United States and arguably the Western world. So many movies in Hollywood have just fucking flopped because they are more interested in pushing diversity quotas onto people, or what they perceive to be diversity, which I don't consider to be true diversity, to use the no-trick Scotsman, true diversity. They're more interested in representation for the sake of representation. They're more interested in sequels and reboots of beloved franchises because pandering to nostalgia is much easier than it is to take risks and actually do something interesting. So overall, just to tie this back, Shimbori is completely off the mark here. Like, he says he loves American comics, and he says, okay, I'll reword what I've been saying a bit. So he says he loved American comics of old, which, as he says, in the old days they emphasized and highlighted, how sexy the girls were. And then he said, nowadays there's a change in the works to present the female characters with a sharp and cool design. Now, I don't know about you, but I look at Captain Marvel and I look at Kamala Khan and I look at there's so many. Femme Thor, She-Hulk, modern She-Hulk, sorry. And I just look at all these quote unquote diverse characters, and I just see political propaganda 24/7. It's all I see from like Marvel and DC, and it's just not. He says it. Shimbori says it's a sharp and cool design, and I'm just not convinced by that. That they don't look sharp and they don't look cool. They look fucking hideous. Like they're trying too hard to look like men, especially Captain Marvel, when the focus should be to celebrate femininity, or the female body. It should be more about that if you're going to have a good female character. Well, not even necessarily like putting an emphasis on the fact that they're female, but just not political mouthpieces at the very least. It's just not fun. Just got to take a look at some comments here. Head Honcho says, I believe it's Phase 4 you're on about. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Phase 4. As you said to me before, eSports is nothing more except sports entertainment, but for video games. Yeah. Yeah. I'll get to the eSports thing in a tick. I'm just trying to deconstruct every point as I see it, as you'll see, because up here we've got quite a few tabs to go through. So I'll try to break this down as much as possible as we keep going. So Shimbori finishes with, in this way, I thought about DoA 6 and the character appearances and how to depict them with variety. And Billy shows an image of just how much of a variety Captain Marvel and characters like her really are. And frankly, the results are just fucking disgusting. Honestly, like I don't look at this and think that's a chick. That's just political bullshit. That's all I see here. I don't see anything cool about it. So let's see. So I don't remember this from when I grew up, but there was a survey, and I couldn't find the survey itself, but years ago when Dead or Alive 5 came out, around with the alpha demo, which came out with Ninja Gaiden 3, I think it was. Koei Tecmo got a survey. They sent out a survey for people to fill in. It's like, what did you think of this alpha version of Dead or Alive 5? Or what did you like about it? What did you hate about it? And this GameSpot post, this GameFAQs post, sorry, it was the only evidence I could find to suggest that yes, there was a survey that went out. I don't have a copy of the survey, so I can't tell you what questions are on there. But the story goes that a lot of people complained about DoA 5, the very first version of DoA 5, not having jiggle physics. So what that suggests to me, and should mean to you, is when DoA 5 came out, or was going to come out, they already tried to do this grittier, more fighting game mechanic centric idea of trying to sell DoA 5 to you. So they tried to minimize or ignore the fan service part of what makes DoA DoA, and tried to, sorry, mic fell down, and tried to give us this this cool kind of like self-congratulatory "I'm a fighter" slogan. People didn't like that. A lot of people thought that was cringy, and I don't disagree with that. I think it's very cringy as well. And I assume a lot of people, from what I've seen on Twitter, said that everyone hated that the jiggle physics weren't there. Like, there was no like political pressure to get rid of the jiggle physics. This was a decision for DoA 5 at least to try to refocus the game's vision, which then ended up with an interview in 2012 for Gama Sutra. I got The Escapist up here archived because you don't know how long The Escapist will live anymore, considering they're not doing so well business-wise. But the same man, so Shinbori, this is the same dude, he said, a lot of fans want bigger breasts. So here's what he had to say, and I find this very interesting. One of the things that I learned was the power of having a series behind you and what it means to be part of a series. There are existing fans out there, and you have to think about the people who have supported this series for so long, and you want to make sure that the game that you make appeals to them first and satisfies those fans first. I'll let you think about that, let it sink in for a bit as we keep reading. We were getting feedback from the overseas officers to tone down the sexuality, to tone down the sexiness of the game and of the characters. We actually got a lot of feedback from people who are playing it saying, we want bigger breasts, make the characters more like that. That was kind of surprising. And he keeps going. There's definitely still room for having sexualized aspects. If you have a solid fighting game system there's nothing wrong with having beautiful characters as a layer on top of that. That's another layer of entertainment that there's a need for. If there wasn't a need for it, people wouldn't have responded to the alpha demo like they did and send us feedback. Notice how he said this in 2012, but now, in relation to Evo and eSports, my fucking phone, Jesus. Hold on, I'm just turning off vibration from my phone. Suddenly, at Evo, the images of the characters will focus on cool as the team heard from the fans at Evo 2017 the opinion that the girls were a bit too sexy and it was embarrassing to play. The request was to make a game that looked cooler. Team Ninja wants everyone to be proud of playing Dead or Alive. Now, I'm not going to sit here on this live stream and get very angry. I'm not going to scream at the top of my lungs, but I am going to say this. What happened between 2012 and 2018, or in this case, 2017 at Evo. What happened between then? There are a lot of things. One thing which I think is the least likely reason, or at least the least significant reason, was because of the eSports push in the fighting game community. So, in their attempt to give professional players a chance to earn a lot of money and have a sustainable income while they play the fighting games that they like, they got a lot of, it was a monkey's paw situation. In exchange for rewarding successful and good players, you have sponsorships, you have corporatism, you have live TV broadcasts where you have to follow their guidelines, your content be damned, whether it's rated by the ESRB or not. And overall, just a swath of political correctness, just a general air of political correctness around the entire FGC, where you talk about toxicity and how everyone needs to grow up and to stop harassing women and to stop doing all these things that we've seen time and again, no matter what the community is. So when people say esports is a mistake, that's what they're referring to. They're referring to all that bullshit. Now, I didn't pull up the article talking about the ESPN stuff when Street Fighter V players had to change their costumes for their female characters, like mid-match. I didn't pull that up, but you can look that up. That did in fact happen. So what I want to ask then is who the hell these people were at Evo 2017? Who are these fans exactly? Like, are they actually fans? Were they actually fans, or were they ideologically motivated to go up to these Koei Tecmo people and to tell them what they personally want? Well, they say what they personally want, but really what their ideology wants out of them. It's something you have to ask yourself, I think. Now, there are, in fact, other fighting game people who you could say are embarrassed to play Dead or Alive, but you have to ask yourself, do they actually, like, how do I phrase this without sounding like a complete cunt? Do they accept DoA for what it is? So, like a Christian dad in the 1950s, do they accept DoA like that Christian dad accepts his gay son for liking men instead of women? I only ask this not because I want to make some drastic hyperbolic comparison to speak from emotion. It's a genuine question, because if you don't accept your son as being gay, or in this case, if you don't accept DoA as a game that has been about fan service since day one, then do you really accept DoA for what it is? Do you actually tolerate its existence? Because frankly, I don't think you do. If you have such a massive problem with DoA 6 where you side with the people who want to censor video games, if you have such a massive problem with this game being as fan service heavy as it is, then I don't think you accept it for what it is. You can try to separate everything surrounding DoA and say, no, the gameplay is all that matters. But frankly, that's not true. It's not just gameplay. If it was just gameplay, then you'd be arguing along the same lines of, Wolverine and Magneto were just functions in the Marvel series, which led to this joke video I saw where this guy modded all the MVC, the Marvel 3 characters to just be blank slates, where they just have the movesets and that's it. If gameplay was all that matters, then style means nothing. creative freedom or creativity or unique games having their own unique identity, none of that matters. Every fighting game you play would just be this gray, homogenized, monotone blur of nothingness, but just gameplay mechanics. So if you're going to like DoA, you have to tolerate, at the bare minimum, you have to tolerate the existence of not only the people who not only the game for having fan service, but the people who bought the game because they like the fan service. You just need a bare minimum amount of acceptance of that. And I don't think people like Ruffelmonger, I don't think YouTubers along his line of thought, I don't think they accept DoA for what it is. They feel ashamed to like something. They refuse to stand up against people like the media or their friends who outright dismiss the game because it has fan service in it. I have to question your dedication if you cannot defend the thing you love from people who lie and slander the things you like. It comes off as cowardly to me. So I'm just going to stop talking because I noticed I got a couple more comments. Head Honcho says, I love female characters, girls like Faye Valentine, Lady Satsuki Kiryuin, Ryuga Matoi, Yoko Littner, Sarah's Victoria, and Revi. I love them because they're not political mouthpieces. Yeah, exactly. Every single female character you listed, I also like. They're all fantastic. And it's not... Revi especially is not a political mouthpiece. She is the most vulgar, the most violent, and fucking foul-mouthed bitch I've ever seen in anime, and I fucking love Revi. She's one of my favorite characters ever. But no, if she was a video game character, I'd hear people complain about, oh no, it's her gunplay that matters. It's only the fact that she shoots guns. That's all that matters here. Nothing about anything else about her identity is more important than her using 2 handguns to shoot people. No. You're just a pervert otherwise, if you care. Novril Tataki, if I remember correctly, you're the dude who does the fighting game videos, like the Guilty Gear stuff. So, hi, how are you? And he said, what happened is that DoA 5 is actually a good game. It can be played based on merit without needing gimmicks. I think they work hard on this aspect and want it to be appreciated. Okay. So yes, DoA 5 is a good game. That's true. But with at least this article, and I've seen someone try to say that the people who were giving feedback from people, someone tried to say they were playtesters, not actual fans, but I think the point still stands regardless of who says it. The point is there are people who enjoy the game not only because it's a complex fighter, but because they also like these sexy female characters. I think that's fine. If you don't have to like DoA for its fan service, but like again, it's just about a basic level of understanding of what you're getting into and not trying to shame other fans for liking the fan service like Ruffelmonger did. And I have a whole Twitter thing about that if you really want me to bring that up. So it's not about shaming other people for liking that stuff, but it's also just knowing what you're getting into. And if people have a prejudice against games like Dead or Alive, then that's their loss, I think. What was your next point? Your next point was without needing gimmicks. What kind of gimmicks? Like, do you mean like gameplay gimmicks, or do you mean like stuff like the soft engine or the jiggle physics? Like, I think they work harder. With your third sentence, I think they work hard on this aspect and want the the gameplay to be appreciated. I agree that they do work hard on the gameplay, but I don't see how you have to sacrifice the game's fan service for gameplay. Because there are other games that have fan service in them and are still good games. So the prime example I would talk about is Sendan Kagura, which is an action beat 'em up series full of high school ninja girls, and there are these pretty big plots. I don't mean like breasts; I mean like actual stories. There are these story threads in the game that can get quite dark. I haven't played Deep Crimson, which is the second game on 3DS. I haven't played that yet, but I am aware of the fact that it's a very dark game. Like a lot of bad shit happens in that stuff, and the characters as well have a lot of thought behind who they are, like what they do, what they're all about, why they think this way, or the way they act with other characters. There's a lot of stuff that complements, I say, the gameplay, and the gameplay in the first 3DS title is crap. I won't deny that, but Estival Versus, which is the first game I played properly, that got me into the series, and the gameplay in that is super fun. Like there's a very diverse range of play styles. I find, well, it kind of falls into archetypes, but each character plays very differently from one another, and it leads to a lot of fun, like gameplay mechanics and stuff like that. Like I personally actually found wave dashing in Estival Versus, and I don't think anyone else had, right? So stuff like that where you can find this stuff and just experimenting with it and having a lot of fun with it, that could still exist alongside having fan service. And that's what I think is the biggest mistake with just bringing this article up here. I think it's a big mistake to sacrifice the soft engine because that's what made DoA unique in its identity. It's what made it stand out. Now, yes, it got a lot of negative feedback, obviously. These things always get negative feedback, depending on the people you're talking to. But it's one of the things I personally really liked about the game, alongside the gameplay. And I think both should be allowed to exist. They shouldn't be in conflict with each other. They should be like working together, I think. And I think it's a real disappointment that this stuff is the inspiration for changing what made DoA DoA. So to prove my point, the free-to-play version of Dead or Alive 5 Last Round broke over 10 million downloads, and that was in 2017. So while it is the free-to-play version, and there's obviously going to be a section of that market, of that player base that is just, oh, this is a free game, therefore I'm going to play the free game, because that's what free-to-play players are like, right? But there are people who, even if they weren't going to spend any money on any of the DLC, which I agree was a very, very bad idea, the amount of DLC they gave this game was absolutely ridiculous. Excuse me. That was a bad idea. I do not. If I ever did play DoA 6, which I'm not going to, but if I did, that would be one of the things I would not want to see happen again, because that is just way too much. But my point with bringing up this stat is that there's a huge fan base for DoA. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them also were big fans because of this stuff. Sorry. And you know this because characters like Mary Rose and Honoka became the cover girls for Dead or Alive Extreme 3. those characters wouldn't exist if the fans didn't give feedback or say, we want this kind of character in the game. Like, that's evidence that there are people who like DoA because they also like the girls being really hot. So the Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball series was sold entirely on the idea that, hey, you know those girls you liked in that fighting game? Well, now here you are. Here you can have them play beach volleyball, and you can ogle them within the privacy of your own house, and you could just have a good time, being with your waifus, basically, which sounds ridiculous for people who don't do that stuff, but clearly it means a lot for a lot of these fans. No, I'll get to that later. So sorry, I'll go back to the comments. I've been rambling a bit. The characters will. Novel Tataki says the characters will still be sexy, but they won't be over the top and ridiculous. That way they probably hype to overall increase the fan base size. We're gonna talk about that. I will talk about that last sentence, but the characters will still be sexy. I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that. I don't think if this is their inspiration that they're going to demonstrate sexiness as much as you think they will. Like, this doesn't scream sexy to me. This doesn't scream that they have sexiness in mind when they're creating these characters, because they said people were ashamed to play the game, and that he wants to look at female characters in modern media to change the direction the game is set in. So no, I'm gonna have to disagree with that. He continues. There's a clear difference between the amount of sex you get in the average fighting game and what you get in Senran Kagura. They simply want to turn it to be closer to normal fighting game levels. No, I disagree with that as well, because DoA characters showed up in Senran Kagura, and honestly, that the amount of fan service in both of those games are relatively equal, at least in my mind, they're equal. And frankly, they didn't need to sacrifice any of the sexiness to still be, have a dedicated fan base who play the games because they think the combat's really good. Like, there are Senran Kagura people who play the game because the combat's good. So to normal fighting game levels, define for me what normal fighting game levels are, because I look at Street Fighter V, and I look at Laura Matsuda, and I look at Armika's default outfit and her critical art before they censored that, and I look at Cammy, and I look at Chun-Li's alternate costume, and I think to myself, how much of that is actually out of line with what we've seen with fighting games? Or if we're going to add more fighting games, how out of line is it with Makoto from BlazBlue or Jam from Guilty Gear, where she wears a different pair of underwear in the game depending on the day of the week? Or just any other hard, like, niche fighting game series. I don't see how Dead or Alive is that much more extreme than any of the other ones. The reason Dead or Alive got a lot of notoriety for being an over-the-top fan service fighting game is because, well, before we were afraid to advertise these games as, just harmless, smutty fun, like with the beach volleyball games, people saw advertisements about, like, Dead or Alive and how they talked about, yeah, you get to play these sexy girls, and look how hot these girls are. Oh, hey, look at that beach volleyball game over there. You fucking love volleyball, don't you? Now you get to see these cute girls do it. So honestly, if any other niche fighting game with fan service was advertised like DoA was, then it would get the same reputation, I think. I don't know. That's just me. Overall, Tataki said, changing what made DoA, but remember that DoA started as a subpar game. When you improve other aspects, there comes a point where the gimmicks do more harm than good. Well, maybe the games did suck back in the day. Like, I don't have a comment either way as to whether or not the first DoA sucked. But to say there comes a point where you have to sacrifice gimmicks to improve other aspects of the game, I'm a bit tired of being nice with you now. I think you're full of shit. I'm a little bit tired of playing nice right now. I think you're just full of shit on this one. Sorry. I don't see how, because I've already mentioned this before, but you don't have to sacrifice one thing over the other. The only reason you think improving fighting game mechanics and sacrificing fan service is important is if you believe the series needs to grow up to be more esports friendly. But I don't want to misrepresent you, so if that's what you believe or not, or don't believe, then by all means you can tell me. Senno Kagura is above what you usually see in fighting games, but I wasn't just talking about fighting games. So all right, we're going to move on a bit. So now we're going to talk about how this is where we're going to get into the esports thing. So in reference to this stuff where they said people were embarrassed to play it, and how, we're going to change it for this game going forward. We already had something similar 3 years ago now, where the Western, and I'm gonna emphasize that clearly, the Western Dead or Alive community decided to ban 120 costumes in DoA 5 so that they could be seen as more presentable to live streams and to esports commenters and presenters. Basically, so that they can avoid any controversial thing that might show up on these streams, and they might get flack from like their sponsors or the mainstream media, stuff like that. So tournament organizers and what I assume are other prominent figures within the DoA community, I can't verify how many of them are actually well respected or well known, but they banned 129 costumes as a solution to try to introduce more players into playing the game and to allow DoA to be seen as a more serious fighting game, alongside the other titles, right? But this was a mistake for a few reasons, and I'm going to try to go through them. I recommend watching Game Theory's old video about the strategy of sex appeal in Dead or Alive, where he talks about this exact topic, and he says and he explains why DoA has a certain edge over other fighting games in terms of how it can influence the meta, or the mind games, the strategies that you use to play the game. And basically what he said, he boiled it down to, if you play as a sexy female character, you can actually impair other players by distracting them with how sexy your costume is. Basically. So he gave what I think is a relatively fair assessment or argument as to why the costumes are actually not a bad idea to have in your game, in your fighting game. So I would recommend watching that if you wanted to look at that. So yeah, to bring up the other point with trying to introduce new players. So I think overall brought it up. Characters will still be sexy, but not over the top. That way, they probably hope to overall increase the fan base size. Well, we're going to talk about whether or not that actually worked. Because here are some tournament results from 2005 to 2018 of every single Dead or Alive tournament that we know of that was registered. I assume all in North America, all of them. But here's what we're going to look at. So these old Dead or Alive tournaments had prize pools of about tens of thousands of dollars. So there were a lot of people who played these games, despite the fact that they had a lot of sexy female characters in them, and that they had no qualms in showing that they are sexy. So we had prize pools going up to $216,000 in 2007 for Dead or Alive 4. We had 182,000. Then we had quite a long period where I assume there's side tournament stuff, so it didn't get much attention. Would that be around the time esports became a thing? I don't know. But I don't think it was, but you never know. And the excuse me. Shit. Sorry, I had food earlier and that didn't feel so good. The last tournament to not have the costume ban, or at least the costume ban was not publicly known. It was Winter Brawl 9 on the 20th of February 2015. Price pool $820. I went and looked for Winter Brawl's numbers. It looked like only 76 people showed up for the tournament at all. So there was no way to discern how many people played DoA 5, but yeah, it wasn't a whole lot of people anyway. So after the costume ban, there were all these other things, all these other tournaments for the same game. Now, people who watch this live stream after the fact, I encourage you to look at all these, to look at this link, to investigate these, and I want people to try and find whether or not the costume ban increased the amount of players who participated in tournaments. And if they did increase the amount of players, was it a significant enough increase to justify the costume ban? So was the costume ban a justifiable reason to, like, was it justifiable? Did it bring in more players in the long run? So my assumption is no. It neither increased nor decreased the amount of players. And I have a few reasons why. So a lot of the people who played these games obviously played it because they enjoyed the game, right? Like, you wouldn't play the game if you didn't enjoy it, especially on a competitive level. You have because when you get competitive, that's when it gets really hard to just like the game for being the game it is. So this already niche community issues a costume ban in hopes of getting more people to come and play their game. And I don't think they increased the amount of players who play. Because also keep in mind, the game Dead or Alive 4 didn't have a costume ban, and they had tournament prize pools that combined over all these years are well over like $1 million. Like that's probably $1 million, maybe more. That was a lot of money back then. So there isn't a lot of incentive to play this game with such a little prize pool. There's not a lot of money in this. So you can't say it's for that esports money, at least these ones. Shit, what was one of my other points? Also, one of the things you would have to consider is a lot of these tournaments, not all of them are very big. Canada Cup is massive. Final round was massive. Combo Breaker. So there are tournaments here where they would have more players in general because they are bigger tournaments. So tournaments that have a larger pool of players for all games, doesn't matter which game, for all games, then it's a lot harder to compare those with like the smaller tournaments where they had like 12 people playing, for example. So that's something to keep in mind as well when you try to look at it. And that's why I think it neither increased nor decreased. So I don't think the costume ban worked because depending on the tournament, the amount of people who went there wouldn't have changed regardless of what they did with the costumes. And also, there will be people who try to argue that girls don't like playing DoA because they think so many girls share this one mindset, which is honestly quite sexist of them. They share this mindset that, oh, these sexy female characters are gross and disgusting, and I don't like playing the game. So this source is, and this is at eSports earnings, by the way. This is a list of the top earning female players in eSports. And here, what we're going to do is we're going to type in Dead or Alive 4. And what we'll find are 12 results. So 12 out of the top 100 women who play eSports played Dead or Alive 4. So if anyone tries to argue that Dead or Alive is sexist or scares away women, I would recommend showing this to them. Because clearly, Dead or Alive 4 had these female players participating without the need to ban any costumes or to ban any characters. There's just something to keep in mind with that, I think. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about? Yes. Okay, so now to look at one of the other reasons as to why they're changing DoA 6's direction. My conclusion is that Koei Tecmo cut itself. They are scared of social justice warriors going after them. And I'll pull this up because I don't know why I didn't open this link up before, but I swear I saved it. Oh, sorry. It was just down there. Okay. So in 2017, there was a game called Blue Reflection that came out, and it was by Koei Tecmo. And people quickly found that in the model view of the game, you were unable to pan the camera downward so that you could see the girl's panties. You could do that in the Japanese version, but you can't do it in the West. Koei Tecmo said they couldn't elaborate on the reason why that was the case back then. And the reason why they didn't say that is because the last time they blamed someone for Dead or Alive Extreme 3 not coming out in the West, they got the media on their ass. The media attacked them like no one's business. I'm just going to take a quick sip of water. So the article I got here doesn't elaborate on what I'm about to talk about, but in a Facebook post many years ago, when people asked why DoA X3 wasn't coming to the West, the community manager person, or the person in charge of the Facebook page, said basically along the lines of feminists are responsible for they're scared of feminists. Basically, they talk about how they feared representing women poorly in the media in their games. They feared the backlash from what people perceive to be a bad portrayal of women. They got a lot of flack for that. They later denied that was actually the reason. I jokingly think that they fired that guy for speaking incorrectly. But the person who said that turned out to be correct anyway, because here is Shuhei Yoshida, basically saying what he believes are cultural differences. He says here, it's the reason why the game didn't come out is due to cultural differences. The West has its own thinking about how to depict women in games media, which is different from Japan. Speaking personally, if it is a representation acceptable to the general people in Japan, I wouldn't be concerned about it in Japan. It's a difficult problem. Okay. To deny the fact that feminists are in control of the media, and to deny the fact that we live in a culture of political correctness that will slander you, lie about you, potentially even harass you or shame you. The shaming part, definitely. The harassment part is a case-by-case thing. They will basically attack you if you dare to have sexy female characters in your games, which is why you see SJW saying a lot of celebratory things surrounding this stuff. It's why they're celebrating it, because that's what they wanted in the end. They wanted Koei Tecmo to capitulate to their demands. These people who are not actually fans of video games, they don't actually play video games. Most of them don't play video games. And those that do are far more interested in pushing their ideology onto everyone else, more so than leaving people alone and leaving these game developers alone and letting them create what they want. If they objected to Dead or Alive so badly, then what they should have done was they should have let the free market decide whether or not this franchise should exist. But the problem is these 10 million misogynists. These 10 million misogynists are stopping them from getting the game either, sacrificing its sexuality or to stop it from existing. Because SJWs don't compromise. They don't like compromises. It ties into the waifu holocaust thing and what Valve said recently. They don't like compromises. It's either you listen to our demands as to how you should run your business, or you pay for it, or we will go after you. We will boycott you. We will harass you and slander you through the media. We will drag your name into the dirt, and we'll shame you until you listen to us. That's what happens, and it's what happened. It happens all the time, and it happened with this game. That's what happened. Which is why I question the people who went up to them at EVO last year saying how they were embarrassed to play Dead or Alive. I question whether those people had Koei Tecmo's best interest in mind, and not that either their own interest or their ideology's interest. I'm just really skeptical about these things. So what's the overall point? The overall point is getting rid of this stuff angers fans of this, angers people who did this and who voted for these polls, who got these characters to exist. And what you're doing is you're sacrificing those people who gave feedback about the game, saying they liked the fan first service just fine. You're shitting on all those people with this and with this in hopes of getting more of this or more of this. You're sacrificing it for esports, and you're sacrificing it for a demographic that was not actually interested in your game in the first place, outside of hating on it and shaming the people who like it and shaming the developers for even thinking about making it. And you're getting comments that number in, you're getting these amounts of comments. You're getting hundreds of comments about it. depending on the outlet you're looking for, you're making a big mistake. Koei Tecmo is making a big mistake about this. Like they failed to recognize that they already had an audience who liked DoA for what it is, played it without any issues, especially women. We're talking about women here, the people who are supposedly alienated from a game series like Dead or Alive. But not only do we have women participating in tournaments, admittedly for DoA 4, but it's still a Dead or Alive game. They participate in tournaments, and I've seen women comment on my Twitter timeline about how they think DoA 6, this whole thing is bullshit. How they think there's no longer a reason to play the game because they sacrificed their identity. Like, people, for some reason, refuse to believe this, but women like sexy women as well. It's clearly obvious to me, and it's obvious to them. So honestly, you should honestly talk to them. You should go up to them and say, "Hey, women who like DoA, why do you like the fan service?" And they'll tell you it's because they like playing as sexy female characters. It's not that difficult to believe that. Why wouldn't you want to play as an idealized version of yourself to some extent? Like, men don't just play games because, oh man, mechanics. You know, it's okay to idealize masculine or feminine figures. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being hot. You don't see men complaining about male fan service at all. Like, that's just not really a thing you see. It's a double standard, is my point. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. So that's everything basically I wanted to go through. That was everything I remember thinking I wanted to say. So okay, so it's 9:30. Now we can read some comments. I noticed you guys got busy. Let's see. Novril Tatoki says, that is not a way to disprove my point. There are many factors involved in a game's esports success. Your problem stems from DoA used to be X, now it will be Y because it doesn't bother you when Virtua Fighter doesn't have bikinis and breast physics. Why do you dismiss the possibility that the creators themselves want the series to become similar to other fighting games while keeping the fan service in DoA X? Okay. What was your point earlier? You said that is not a way to disprove my point. I forgot what that was in reference to. So if you could comment that again, that'd be cool. There are many factors involved in the game's esports success. Well, yes, obviously, but does Dead or Alive actually need the esports fame? Is it actually necessary? You don't see people saying Under Night In-Birth really needs that esports money. You don't see people saying Arcana Heart really needs to be on the esports main stage. You don't see anyone saying something like that, or Nitro Plus Blasters with Supersonico or Homura from Senran Kagura, by the way, or Saber, or basically every other fighting game with fan service in them. You don't see people saying, "Oh man, it's such a shame that those games have fan service. Otherwise, they would have all that esports fame that normies will totally support." Yeah, that's really what I want my game series to have. Dead or Alive doesn't need esports. Never needed esports. So why do I dismiss the possibility that the creators themselves want the series to become similar to other fighting games? Because I don't trust Shinbori's words here. As I already pointed out, he said in 2012, I'll pull up the article again just so I can read it to you. in the Escapist magazine, he told Gamasutra, there are existing fans out there, and you have to think about the people who have supported the series for so long, and you want to make sure that the game you make appeals to them first and satisfies those fans first. Well, I'm sorry, but this recent decision does not satisfy a large number of Dead or Alive fans. This is not up to their satisfaction, which is why you're seeing the backlash now, and it's why back when DoA 5 was coming out, a lot of people said, we got a lot of feedback from people who were playing it saying we want bigger breasts, make the characters more like that. Shinbodi's words, 2012. So when you say why do I dismiss the possibility the creators themselves want the series to become similar to other fighting games? Because Shinbody contradicted himself. Initially, he knew exactly what the fans wanted, but now, suddenly, after the media slandered them and attacked them, and after SJWs shamed them and shamed the fans for liking that stuff, then you're damn fucking right I'm going to dismiss whatever possible reason they give to justify their bullshit. I don't give a shit what reasoning they give. How they're like, oh, the small handful of people who came to us at Evo last year who were totally sincere and had our best interests in mind, they were so embarrassed to play Dead or Alive, they can't possibly defend this game's existence to their shitty fucking normie friends and the media. It's just so hard for them. It's so disappointing. It's so disappointing that they have to feel that way. We have to apologize to them. Or how they're like, oh man, we got to look at modern American comics and films with their shitty social justice bullshit and their progressive propaganda. Yeah, that's exactly what people wanted. We totally came to this decision ourselves without any pressure whatsoever from other people. So you say, why not keep the fan service to the Extreme Volleyball series? Well, for one thing, we can't even get the Extreme Volleyball series starting with 3 because they're scared of what the SJWs would say. Hell, I'm going to spoil the video I'm working on for you a bit, and I'm going to bring up to you the articles that came out when the VR update for Extreme 3 was announced. When video footage showed someone wearing a VR headset poking at Kasumi's boobs and her butt. Excuse me, I'm going to burp soon. Excuse me. 8 articles came out, ranging from Metro to Polygon to news.com.au to Cog Connected to a Brazilian news site, and they all said it was literally simulating sexual assault. And you want to sit there and tell me there's nothing wrong with them bringing the fan service over to those games? You see nothing wrong with them limiting it to that when people will even attack that game for existing. You don't know what you're talking about. These people don't give a shit if you separate the fan service from the core fighting game into the volleyball series. They don't want the volleyball series to exist either. Don't you understand this? They don't want people to have those games. And you'll rebut, well, you could buy the game anyway. It's not like it was banned. Doesn't matter. The culture in the Western video game industry is so toxic to these kinds of games that Koei Tecmo are fucking terrified. They are terrified. The VR update came out in the Japanese version before the Asian version. The Asian version, which has English subtitles, took months to come out for us. They had to wait for the media storm to die down before they could just release it in a patch update without any issues. It took them so long to do that. But no, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with this situation here, is there? Why does just to keep harping on that point, why does Dead or Alive have to be more in line with other fighting games? Why does DoA have to conform to other people's standards of what constitutes an appropriate fighting game? Who dictates what's appropriate here? Why should they dictate what's appropriate? What right do they have? Why shouldn't DoA be allowed to embrace its sexuality the way it does? Why should my gay son not be accepted for being gay? Why should he not be tolerated here? Genuine question. I want you to try and think about that and answer it. Why should other people dictate? These people outside of the DoA community, why should they dictate to everyone else whether or not they're allowed to have sexy female characters? Why can't we have a middle ground where there are conservative outfits and there are more liberal outfits, referring to the costume ban? Why aren't people allowed that? What about the other DoA fans that they are shitting on to appease these people who probably won't even play in a tournament for this game? What about people like me? What about people who supported the beach volleyball games, or supported DoA 5 or the DLC costumes, despite how ridiculous they are? What about us? Why should we be kicked out of the fandom here? Because as far as I could tell, we didn't actually do anything wrong. We don't deserve to be shamed or shunned by other people for liking a video game series that has a lot of TNA in it. Continuing with your point, they could also not improve the mechanics, but they still put in the effort. This is a clear change of direction coming from them, not from the outside. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit. I don't believe you for 1 second. You're lying to me. If it's true that this change of direction comes from within, without any outside influence whatsoever, then please explain to me why Dead or Alive Extreme 3 was not allowed to come out in the West. I'd say not allowed when I actually mean they were scared to release it in the West. Explain to me why Blue Reflection, which is an RPG, does not allow Westerners to pan the camera up to see the girl's panties. You're not forced to do that, by the way. You could choose to do that. You're not forced to do it. Why would they censor that? Why would they censor that for the West only if they did not believe that Westerners would react poorly to that feature? And by Westerners, I mean the social justice warriors, and I mean the media. The same media that literally, and I do mean literally, accused the VR update for Extreme 3 as being a sexual assault simulator that contributed to rape culture. You sit there and you try to convince me that them toning down the sexuality in Dead or Alive 6 has nothing to do with that. How fucking dare you? You have no fucking idea what you're talking about, honestly. You cannot say they're just trying to improve the gameplay mechanics, therefore the change of direction comes from within, and they're toning down the sexuality because reasons, just because. You're a fucking liar, mate. I'm sorry. I don't believe you for a second. Why else would they look at American films? Why else would they look at American comics? Why would they consider this quote-unquote feedback from people who say they're embarrassed to play DoA? Like they said it themselves. People said to them, oh, hey, we're embarrassed to play DoA in front of our friends and stuff like that. This game makes us feel uncomfortable. They literally said, Team Ninja wants to make everyone Team Ninja wants everyone to be proud of playing Dead or Alive. Proud? They want them to be proud to play the game. by toning down the sexuality, frankly, I just think those people are a bunch of prudes who are intolerant, or I dare say bigoted against these fan service games. They have a very bad prejudice against them. Whereas the 10 million people who downloaded Core Fighters, the silent majority, I would argue, well, they were perfectly fine with it, weren't they? You didn't see them subtly saying, man, this free-to-play game's really good, the combat's really good. How dare those women be hot? Oh, excuse me again. God, what's with my burping today? How dare those girls have those costumes? How dare they, right? People who buy that shit should be ashamed. They should be embarrassed. Team Ninja wants everyone to be proud to play the game. That's their words, not mine. And you want to sit there and say, focusing on the gameplay mechanics more than the sexuality is just how it has to be. No, it isn't. It doesn't have to be that way. They decided to make it that way because they are scared of social justice warriors. I'm not saying they became social justice warriors. I'm saying they're scared of them. Their actions are very clear on that. When they said they couldn't elaborate on Blue Reflection on why it was censored, that's them showing they're scared. That's them worrying about what would happen if they did admit what the reason as to why they censored the game. They are scared of the media. They're scared of the Western media slandering them because it's happened for years. It never stopped. People like Jim Sterling or Bob Chipman or any of the other media outlets that you know of, they hate Dead or Alive. They hate Koei Tecmo for doing this. And Koei Tecmo are fucking scared of them. So don't sit there and tell me that this is their decision that they made with no other input. That's fucking disgusting of you. How dare you? Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball and DoA are two different cases. Bullshit. Again, they still attacked Dead or Alive 5 for having the fan service that it did. They still attacked the game for having all these sexy costumes. Obviously, there was the criticism that the game had too many costumes, and I agree with that criticism. But there are also people who said that these costumes are really disgusting and deplorable and sickening and objectifying. These people said this. I'm certain of it. There are people who think that. Doesn't matter if it's in the beach volleyball games or Dead or Alive. And I'll give you my anecdotal evidence, which doesn't really matter much in the long run, but I'll give you my anecdotal evidence. So I used to be a feminist many years ago now, and I'll make a video on this later about my story related to that. But basically, there was a moment where I was hanging out with my friends, and they were playing Dead or Alive 5 on screen, or Dead or Alive 4. And I, as a feminist, shamed them for playing a game that objectified women. I actually shamed my friends for playing Dead or Alive. Do you not think I feel bad about that now? Do you not think when I said that, it came from a place where I believed in the ideology I spouted? Do you not think I genuinely believed that they should not be playing that game or should not be enjoying the game because it has tits and ass in it and costumes? Because that's what I did. And it's what other SJWs did. I did that. And I feel fucking terrible for doing it. So doesn't matter whether it's Extreme Volleyball or Dead or Alive 5. Like, the fact of the matter is, people hate DoA for its fan service. And they will shame you for liking that. Because I did it. I did that when I was a feminist. So why should they separate the fan service from the core of the fighting game series? I don't see the point in it. You're sacrificing, you're rejecting a part of your identity by pushing it away onto some other spin-off of the franchise. You're shunning it, you're exiling it, you're pushing it away to try to say, we take ourselves very seriously and we would like to have that eSports money and to show you that we are just as good of a fighting game as everyone else. Excuse me. When frankly, Dead or Alive was still a good fighting game regardless of the fan service being there or not. So why get rid of the fan service if the game is still fun to play? Seriously. Like, fuck, dude. DoA X can have shitty mechanics, but no one cares since people don't buy it for deep volleyball play. Well, that's true for DoA X3, but not 2. People actually have said Dead or Alive Extreme 2 actually is a fun game to play. In fact, I own a copy of it right now, and I intend to play it at some point. People have said it's actually a fun game to play. And also, yes, people of course played it for the fan service, but I don't see how that's a problem. Like, why should the fan service be neglected or emphasized more than the gameplay? Why should either of these things be out of balance here? Early DoA X3 reviews said that the game itself was rather boring and kind of crappy, which is a terrible shame, I think, that happened. But yes, there was that sex appeal. So, mainline DoA is not just fan service, it's also a fighting game. They improved the mechanics in DoA before the drama. Yes, I agree. Mainline DoA is more than just fan service. I completely agree. It's also a really good fighting game. But my point is, and I'll repeat myself because I've said this more than once, but I'll say it again. You can have good fighting game mechanics and fan service at the exact same time. It's not one over the other here. They can be developed in tandem. They could be developed alongside each other to a satisfactory degree. It's not impossible to do that. I'm not saying you are wrong regarding DoA X, but the story with mainline DoA is more complex than that. The story, as in the game's like in-game story, or the story surrounding the controversy of the game. Because if it's about the story in the game, it's not that good of a story anyway. Like that I never did record this, although I should have in retrospect because it was really funny and really enjoyable. The Dead or Alive 5 story is fucking terrible. It's really bad. I was fucking raging over how fucking bad it was. So people don't play for the story, but I don't think that's what your point was. I think you do mean I guess you could say the community reception. And you're right, it is more complex, but it's only complex in that there are a lot of news stories about the game and its misrepresentation or its or the way they spun DoA in the media to make it look bad. It's only complex in that there are so many stories that did that. When in actuality, it's just you can just boil it down to the Western media doesn't like DoA, SJWs don't like DoA, They never liked DoA ever, even with the fighting game series, because most of them don't play fighting games or games in general. And they attacked the fans, and they attacked Koei Tecmo for daring to have fan service in their game. And now Koei Tecmo are listening to them. They are listening to the minority over the 10 million people who downloaded Core Fighters. Now, I'm not saying all 10 million of those people were non-SJW people. I'm sure a couple of them were SJWs who do like the gameplay, but they're not a sizable market. They're not worth pandering to. There are many games that try to pander to that ideology, like Firewatch or was it Sunset? It was the one with the black female protagonist, and it was made by the Firewatch devs, I think. No. Sunset was the house cleaning one, and that was a story about a black woman's personal experience with oppression in the 20th century because of her race and her gender and her occupation. It didn't sell well. Games along those lines don't actually sell well. So what's happening here is Koei Tecmo is pandering to a minority of people who have institutional power, and by that I mean they have media influence, they have power in the media. They're projecting their message louder than the majority of people who don't hate DoA. So they're louder than the 10 million people who downloaded the game for free. And Koei Tecmo, after many years of having that exact same message parroted to them by the media, decided that those people are the audience now. That they're going to listen to them instead of the people who wanted larger breasts and who bought the costumes and bought DoA X3. So Dead or Alive Extreme 3 for PlayAsia was their best-selling title. Excuse me. Fuck. Dead or Alive Extreme 3 was PlayAsia's best-selling import title. And you can... Part of a large factor into why it sold so well is because of the controversy surrounding the game's non-release in the West and the reason why it wasn't going to be sold in the West. So a lot of people in protest against SJWs bought the game to support not only that kind of content, but also PlayAsia for calling it like it is. So that's something you have to consider. You said the fact that you yourself were on the extreme side in the past doesn't mean the Evo players mentioned came from that place. Yes, I will keep in mind, I actually wasn't that extreme in my feminist beliefs even back then when I was at my worst. Like I wasn't on the man-hating train. I wasn't a full-blown racist against white people around that time. I wasn't at that level. I wasn't a full-blown sexist against men and racist against white people back then. There are people who said that stuff that I didn't necessarily agree with, even when I was a feminist. It doesn't mean that the Evo players mentioned came from exactly the same place. Well, not all, because the fans at Evo 2017 phrase that Shimbori uses, it's vague. So you can't tell whether or not it's the players who played at the side tournament in DoA 5, or if they were players of DoA 5, or if they said they were fans but weren't actually fans. It's vague, which is why I was careful throughout this live stream to say I am skeptical as to whether or not all of these people came from a place of good faith, or if they were ideologically motivated. Because I do think there were, even if it was just one person who came up to them and said that that they were embarrassed to play DoA. Even if it was just one person who was ideologically motivated, that counts for me. There are people who are ideologically motivated to go after people and try to influence them into agreeing with their ideology. It's what I used to do. So if it's not impossible for me to do that, to try to force my opinions down other people's throats regarding fan service in like anime or video games, then it's not impossible to see other social justice oriented people do the same thing. Because the ideology, they genuinely believe the ideology. They genuinely believe that the society they live in is oppressive, it's racist, it's sexist, it's bigoted. They genuinely believe what they are doing is important. They believe their ideology is important to progressing society to a point where they believe it has become a utopia. So they believe in reaching a utopia. And how do you do that? Well, there are a lot of ways you can do that, but the main one is activism, and infiltration is another one. So like infiltration of communities, and basically going to quote Patrick Newman, the CEO of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, the sinners are on the street, go talk to the sinners. So basically preaching the word of social justice, that's an important goal that they follow, and it's what I followed back then. So I agree that not every person who plays DoA who went to Koei Tecmo in 2017, I do agree, not all of them went up to them for that reason. But it doesn't matter if it was all of them. The fact of the matter is, I am suspicious, and I suspect that there were SJWs who went up to them to try to say that stuff. That was my point talking about that. Continuing, you speak as if there are only two options to choose from, either extreme in this direction or the other. Many people are in the middle. I'm not the one who presented the dichotomy here. Your arguments earlier were talking about how DoA was, how Koei Tecmo were like, they wanted to focus more on gameplay mechanics and not gimmicks, and that they wanted to move away from fan service. I'm not the one who presented that dichotomy. That was actually you. And people can look at the archive of the comments and they can see that wasn't me who said that. So I don't think I was portraying this either my way or the highway thing. What I was trying to say was that it's pointless to sacrifice a part of your identity to try to appease people who weren't going to buy your video game anyway, or who will never forgive you for what you did in the past. Like, that was my point. Like, if Koei Tecmo said, like, if there was no media outrage, no social justice stuff happening, if none of that happened, and they said we want to focus more on the gameplay rather than the fan service, then you couldn't say yes, then that they made the decision themselves. But they already tried that with Dead or Alive 5. They already tried to turn off jiggle physics or remove jiggle physics, and fans said, we want jiggle physics back. So, like, it can't just be all gameplay mechanics or all fan service. If it's all fan service, you get Dead or Alive Extreme 3, which means it's not a very good game. And then if you just focus on gameplay, then you don't have Dead or Alive anymore. You just have Virtua Fighter, the Virtua Fighter spinoff, which at that rate, you might as well just ask for another Virtua Fighter. But I know a lot of people are dissatisfied with Virtua Fighter not having another game. Excuse me. Another game to its belt, but I'm sorry. Just because Virtua Fighter isn't a thing anymore doesn't mean you should turn DoA into Virtua Fighter. That's not fair. That'd be like what if Virtua Fighter was turned into DoA? Would that be fair to Virtua Fighter? I don't think it would be. If I was a Virtua Fighter fan, I have Virtua Fighter 5, but I haven't played it. If I was a fan of that series, and they're like, oh, we're just gonna basically make this into a Dead or Alive mainline entry, I'd be pretty mad at that, I think. I wouldn't be satisfied with that. That wouldn't be fair. Like, because I would think to myself, why can't Virtua Fighter exist as its own thing, and DoA can be over there and be its own thing? Now, the funny thing is, what I just said is true, but it's flipped. Why can't DoA be its own thing and Virtua Fighter be its own thing over there? So, people are allowed to dislike extremely unrealistic jiggle physics. It doesn't make them Puritans. It's unfair to characterize them with the extremists. People are allowed to dislike the jiggle physics. I never said they aren't allowed to like it. My entire point was, if you don't like it, don't shame other people for liking it, and don't buy the game if it offends you so badly. It's called the free market. You are free to make the decision you want as a consumer to support a game or not support the game with your money. This is what people did with Battlefront 2, with the EA thing and the loot box thing. People spoke with their wallets. EA lost a lot of money to it. They got a lot of negative feedback. And they temporarily got rid of the loot box features and replaced it with cosmetic stuff. That's the free market deciding that. The DoA thing is not the free market deciding that, because, like I mentioned before, 10 million people downloaded Core Fighters, so fan service being in the game is not an issue for a lot of people. So then you have to wonder why they got rid of the fan service in the next entry. It's unfair to categorize them with the extremists. Well, I'm not saying they're extremists, but what I will say is they certainly will not stop the extremists from going after the game's fan service. So even if the moderates who don't like the fan service will not say they dislike the fan service, or they'll say, I don't like the fan service, but whatever, those same people will not stop the extremists from going after the fan service and getting rid of it. They are perfectly fine with that happening. It's the same thing with, and you're probably not going to like this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's the same thing with isolated Muslim communities. There are surveys showing, there are polls showing that a large percentage of Muslims do not like homosexuals. They believe a husband can beat their wife. 33% did in this UK study I saw. 33% of people said it's okay for a man to beat their wife, which is very, very archaic thing in those kinds of cultures, not just Muslim cultures, but like archaic, old-timey, conservative, unwilling to progress cultures, which is what you see in Islamic societies. The Muslims in those communities are not willing, but a lot of them are not willing to speak up against the extremists who say they want to kill homosexuals, they want to treat white women as trash because they are not Muslim and they don't cover up. Those people do not speak out against them. Very few of them do. I can name three off the top of my head who speak out against Muslim extremism. Majid Nawaz, Imam Tawhidi, and Ayaan Hirsi Ali. And the problem with that is Majid Nawaz is derided as an extremist by the Southern Poverty Law Center. He's considered an extremist. This moderate Muslim, this reformed Muslim who wants to bring Islam into the modern world, is derided as a radical and as an extremist. Imam Tawhidi has Muslims in Australia calling him a dog, threatening violence against him and his family, hitting him, assaulting him, throwing water in his face or spitting on him or doing all these horrible things to him because he believes that Islam has a fundamental problem with tolerance, with women, with gays, with all these things. And Ayaan Hirsi Ali was mutilated as a little girl. She had her clitoris cut off. And you have Muslims like Linda Sarsour saying that she would cut her clitoris off again because she doesn't think she earns the right to be a woman. You have these radicals within these communities, so social justice or Muslim communities, and you have moderates, or quote-unquote moderates, who will not speak up against them, who will not go after them and tell them, fuck off, you're wrong, this is ridiculous, we're in the 21st century, learn to be tolerant. You have a lot of people who don't say that, whether it's because they are scared of them or because they agree with them silently. You could have normal British Muslims grow up in Britain in isolated Muslim communities believing all these horrible things about white girls and homosexuals. You can have a lot of that in a modern first world country. So my point is, yes, it's unfair to categorize moderates or people who don't like fan service as SJWs or as the extremists of the SJWs, but that's kind of an oxymoron in my opinion. It's unfair to categorize them as being the same person, but why aren't they speaking up against them? You have to ask yourself that. It's very possible that some people are fans of DoA, but not of everything within DoA. People can, for example, like the characters, the general, and the models, but not the jiggle physics. Yes, that's true. And that's why in Dead or Alive 5, they have the option to turn off jiggle physics. You can go natural jiggle physics. You can turn the jiggle physics off. You can put them on moderate. You can put them on Dead or Alive. You can put them on... excuse me. You can put them on any settings you want. And that is an example of what I believe would be a suitable compromise. So you would give people the option to have the ridiculous jiggle physics that people shame others for liking or having a good laugh at. So you have that option for the people who want that, and then you have the option for people who would prefer to turn that off. There's a card game on Steam called Eternal Destiny that initially censored a lot of the artwork on the cards because they thought people would not like the sexualized females on the cards. After people who bought the game complained to them and said, I like the original content, I would love to play the game uncut. The developers of Eternal Destiny, or the localizers anyway, Degika is their name. They said, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll give you something called a toggle switch of sort. So we can give you the option to play the uncensored artwork or the censored artwork, and we'll leave it up to you guys to decide on your own which ones you want. And I think Dead or Alive 6 would have been better off doing that as well. it would have been better off letting you have jiggle physics if you wanted it. So you could say, they could have said, we'll have jiggle physics, but it'll be turned off by default. But if you want to turn it on, that's fine. That's what they should have done, but they didn't do that. And that really disappoints me as a fan. And it's because of that refusal to meet in the middle, to recognize the rest of the DoA audience and what they wanted out of the game. It's their refusal to do any of that that has led me to the decision that I'm not buying the game. Like, sorry, you're not getting my money because of that. Yes, people have deciphered the jiggle physics in the trailer, Novel Tatsuki. So he asked, DOI6 has no jiggle physics at all? Yes, that is the case. People have found no evidence of jiggle physics in the trailers or in the gameplay. They are rock solid. Like, the boobs don't move. No one has found any jiggle physics whatsoever. So, and part of the reason the jiggle physics disappeared is because they got rid of the soft engine, which is where they developed the modern tech for the jiggle physics. So yeah. What does it have instead? The developers said, what did they say? So they wanted to focus on cool characters, but I'll just pull up the other article. Okay, so it's taken a while to load. Come on, please load. I'm trying to pull up the article that says Dead or Alive 6 announced sexualization toned down to be more realistic. I'm trying to get the quote Shimbori said, but I want to read it to you verbatim, just so you know exactly what they're going for. But the basic gist of his quote is, we're going to focus more on the natural flow of battle and trying to make the characters look cool, like in a more natural sense, rather than trying to exaggerate. Let's see. Okay, so I got the article up. We wanted to make a more cool and mature Dead or Alive this time, and to that end, we made a conscious decision to make the characters less sexualized. It goes without that saying. Okay, no, that's IGN's input. Oh, where was the fucking quote? Head Honcho asks, did Razorfist recently post a video called Hollywood Was Always Red? Yes, he did, and it's an excellent video. The video, for those who don't know, looked at the history of Hollywood within the context of communist union groups infiltrating the industry and basically trying to strong arm people into agreeing with the demands of their unions. And also talks about how communists used Hollywood to push communist propaganda through their movies onto the general populace. It's an excellent video. It's based on a lot of testimonies from people who worked within the industry at that time. It's based on books written about communism in Hollywood. It's a well-researched video, and it also goes into debunking the narrative that McCarthyism was about communism in Hollywood, which Razorfist explains is not the case. Joe McCarthy never said anything about Hollywood in his congressional hearings with the U.S. Congress and the Senate. He was talking about how communists were infiltrating government and institutions. He never said Hollywood by name or talked about Hollywood. He was referring to politically motivated communists trying to unravel the fabric of American society. Basically, that's basically what he actually talked about. And there are other people who said in front of Congress that this is what's happening with Hollywood. Like, these unions are doing this, threatening to boycott my film, or trying to coerce me into agreeing to let them on my team to spread their propaganda. In fact, one of the interesting things as well is quite a few of those racist cartoons that came out. Oh, yeah, the racist cartoons that came out in Hollywood were written by those communists, which I found was very interesting. These communists also were responsible for the narrative that Walt Disney hated Jews. Like that, they were the ones who spread that in the newspapers. The newspapers were either owned by communists or had ties with the Communist Party in Hollywood, and that's where the anti-Semitism thing came from. Okay, so God, so much fucking nonsense with IGN. Let's see. He says we wanted to make a cool DoA. The female characters are still attractive, as are the men, but first and foremost, they are fighters. This is him admitting that there is a change of focus in the game from being a fan service fighting game to just being a fighting game, predominantly. Our goal is to no longer force characters to look great at all times, but to leave that up to the natural flow of battle. The game will look more realistic, but we have no intention in changing the sci-fi fantasy atmosphere with ninjas, clones, and whatnot. In the real world, not even the strongest fighter can survive that, but that's what survive falling off a skyscraper, but that makes DoA fun. The new sense of reality will come in handy to make this over-the-top fighting more convincing. Now, I will tell you this with the things that with this this goal to strive for more realism. That's a feminist talking point, and the reason it is because when I was a feminist, definitely. So I speak from experience from saying this, but the argument for realism is used as a justification to explain why you should feel ashamed for portraying women with big boobs that jiggle around a lot. That's what that talking point is based on. It's based on it's based on shaming you for taking fictional liberties with characters. Which is why when I talk about Battlefield 5 and that whole controversy, I don't say the developers sacrificed realism for diversity's sake. I say they sacrificed authenticity for diversity's sake. And what I mean by authenticity, especially within the context of Battlefield 5, is they've sacrificed the authentic feeling that you're playing within a World War II setting by having a lady soldier with a prosthetic arm fighting in the British Army. Same with a black person as well, which I don't think there were either no black people in the British Army, or there were a very, very small handful of black people who fought in the British Army. But the point is, they sacrificed the authentic experience that they said, that the developers said they wanted to take direct inspiration from. So they wanted to, in a way, celebrate Battlefield 5. They wanted to emphasize that it is a game set in World War II, and they sacrificed that authentic feeling that it's set in World War II for this fictionalized, this fake version of World War II. If they came out and said, we want to take more liberties with World War II and put our own fictional spin on it, then that'd be fine. Or I wouldn't agree with it, because I still think they'd be pushing a diversity agenda, but this forced diversity agenda, I should specify. But I would have less of a problem with that than them trying to say at the same time, this is an authentic World War II experience, and also women fought in World War II as well, which, let's face it, the overwhelming majority of people who fought and died in World War II were not women. It was overwhelmingly men. So, okay. But let's say you put all the Puritans aside for a second. They won't buy the game anyway. Okay. What if the direction they are taking will indeed increase the game success among average gamers? Well, I hate bringing this up again, but 10 million people downloaded DoA 5 despite the fact that the game has a lot of fan service and a lot of costumes in it. That's 10 million people. That's still quite a lot. That's more people playing your game or owning your game than companies who sell a AAA game sell. So, like, what's one example? There was a AAA game that sold like 3 million or something. It wasn't a lot. There are big games that had less people buy the game than DoA 5 had people who downloaded it for free. So, with this average gamer demographic, my question to you would be, why should Koei Tecmo concern themselves with the average gamer if the average gamer also never intended to buy the game in the first place because, haha, weird titty game? Like, I don't think... Well, that's the thing with the average gamer, because it could go either way. They could either be the, haha, look at this fan service, this is gay, I don't want this. Or they could be the silent majority average gamer who just plays the game, doesn't think one way or the other about the fan service, or is like, yeah, whatever, fan service, I just want to play the game. So let's say the average gamer is one who focuses on the gameplay more than the fan service for a second. Let's assume that is who they are. Why then, if they can play the game despite the fan service, should you alienate the people who play the game for the gameplay and the fan service? What's the point of alienating the other people? And it's a large amount of people, I'll say that much. It might be a minority, it might be a majority. It's still a lot of people. You're still talking about a lot of people who now are alienated by Koei Tecmo's decision to change the direction Dead or Alive 6 is going down. It's a similar thing to God of War. So God of War 4 changed its direction drastically to be more like an action game version of The Last of Us, which alienated a lot of God of War fans who played the original games and played it because they liked the action game element. And God of War decided to not cater to those people who played the game for that reason, and instead played for one who catered to an audience that played games like Horizon Zero Dawn or these other big budget Sony exclusives with similar gameplay and whatnot. Now, don't get me wrong, God of War 4 still sold a lot, but again, that's complicated. It doesn't. God of War 4 doesn't have any like PC bullshit associated with it either. Not really, I don't think. And that's important to consider because there are games that did have social justice in them that didn't sell, that neither increased sales or actually did decrease sales, and one of those would be Fire Emblem Fates, but that's a whole other game. So, so what if the direction they're taking will indeed increase the game's success among average gamers? Well, my question to you would be, why should the average gamer matter for the Dead or Alive series? Why should they broaden their appeal to as many people as possible when they have a perfectly sizable niche that likes the game for what it is and will pay money to play the game, like whether it's a volleyball game or a fighting game? That's my question. Because your theory, while maybe true for DOAX, doesn't explain their push for presenting DOA 5 as a legit fighting game before the drama. Okay. The shaming thing, you have to realize the media shamed Dead or Alive before Dead or Alive 5 was even a game as well. Like, they attacked Dead or Alive Dimensions, which is on the 3DS. They've attacked Dead or Alive 4, and I'm pretty sure they've attacked volleyball Extreme 2, like the second volleyball game. And that was when DOA was still like around DOA 3, DOA 4, that kind of era. The media still attacked the game for those reasons. They still went after it. So I do think that DOA 5 tried to cater to people who were focused less on the fan service, more on the gameplay, with their "I'm a fighter" slogan, which a lot of people thought was pretty cringy, and it didn't actually, like, fill them with excitement. Like, I brought up earlier that there was a survey, and based on anecdotes I got from Twitter about that survey, because I couldn't find the survey itself, but nor could I find articles where they talked about that survey specifically. But apparently, a lot of people said, "Where are the jiggle physics?" So that was without as much drama as today, or even before any of that drama. If you want to go down that road, they still made the decision to try to not talk about the jiggle physics, but people still say, "Where are the jiggle physics?" So, option 1, you are correct in both cases of the games. Or option 2, with DOA 5, they tried to play both cards at the same time and saw that it can't be done. The stigma harms the reception, despite the "it's legit now" slogans. Yeah, they did try to play both cards, and they still got shit for it. But that's my point. The people who gave the game shit are not tolerant of the game existing as it is. They were never going to accept DOA as the fan service fighting game that it is. Like, even if in DOA 5 they had no jiggle physics, if DOA 5 had no jiggle physics whatsoever, the SJWs would still go after the game because of, like, the costumes, for example. Like, not even the DLC costumes. They would still go after, like, Tina or Kasumi or Ayane, or Momiji. They would still go after. They'd go after Honoka. They'd go after Mary Rose. They did go after Mary Rose, even though she was in a goth Lolita outfit, which, FYI, is a much more popular outfit amongst women. especially in Japan. Japanese women love the goth Lolita style. It has nothing to do with the male gaze. So people still criticize the game for having a character like Mary Rose, where she still wore a pretty sensible dress, I think. And they criticized her for being like, oh, she's totally 18, guys. You're totally not being a creepy weirdo. Like, as much as, and my example for this would be Pat from Super Best Friends Play, who hates the fact that Virtual Fighter will never come back, and he also believes that DoA is a good game, and that he thinks it's a shame that it's so creepy. I'm basically paraphrasing what he said back when they played the game for Friday Night Fisticuffs. So people like Pat still believe that, I don't think he's an SJW, by the way. I just want to say that. I don't think he's an SJW. But there are still people who think, even if I focused on the fighting game here, the fan service is just, you know, is a detriment to the game and its image, when it's not actually the game's fault that it has the stigma that it has. It's the reaction to the game's identity that got it the stigma that it had. So, should I talk about the criminological theory of labeling? Yeah, I'll bring it up. So in criminology, there's something called labeling theory, which basically means that people, usually younger people, so like teenagers, receive a label from the community as a reaction to the discovery that that person committed a crime. So there is a social backlash against someone committing a crime, right? So that makes sense. In DoA's case, the mere existence of its fan service, people reacted. There were people who reacted negatively to the fan service in the game. It's not DoA's fault that they wanted to be a fan service fighting game series. I don't see what the problem is with wanting to be that. I have no problem with them wanting to have fan service and a good fighting game. But there were people who shamed it despite it being a good game series because it has titties in it. Option 3, both option 1 and 2 are correct at the same time. They try to get two birds with one stone, less drama from the annoying media and continuing a direction they already started. Well, I'm sorry, but this drama started because Shinbori openly admitted to capitulating to what the media wanted from them. There wouldn't be drama if the media left the game series alone, and if people left it alone. Like, you can criticize the fan service. I believe in free speech. You can criticize it. You can shame people for liking it if you want. If you want to be that much of an asshole, I'm all for that. You can shame people and criticize them for liking the fan service. But that doesn't mean, therefore, they should never make a fan service fighting game, or they should never consider doing that. People should be allowed to make that. Like, I would love if DoA 6 just did not have this drama. When I first saw that there was a trailer that came out, I was very excited. And then I watched it, and I finished watching it, and I thought to myself, that looks pretty interesting. And then I found out what Shinbori said about the game and what they were trying to do for it, and my heart sank. I was truly upset by that news. I had a really shitty weekend because of this news. It really upset me. because I always thought of Dead or Alive as the series that would embrace what it was and continue forward despite people hating on it. That to me speaks much more positively than capitulating to bullies. Because I don't think you should apologize to bullies. They're bullies. If you did nothing wrong, you have no reason to apologize. And DoA did nothing wrong. But because they think they did something wrong, now they actually did something wrong, and it's backfiring on them again. Because the core DoA fans found out about this, and they said, what the fuck, right? Like, well, what's the point of playing this game now if I don't have my sexy girls along with my fighting game? Because again, if it was just fighting game mechanics that mattered, it wouldn't. Then Core A Gaming did a video on this about animation, like animation in fighting games, and like why it matters. Now, it doesn't play into fan service necessarily, but the point is the same. If fighting games, if gameplay was all that mattered for fighting games, then they would all be homogeneous blobs. They would all be identical to each other. There would be no style, no individuality, no identity to them. So, okay, when I say average gamer, I simply mean people who didn't see the appeal in the series in the past. It's common to try to teach new crowds. A lot of developers tried to do it. Okay, thank you for the explanation of that. Well, if they didn't see the appeal of the game in the past, then all it takes is for, like, it's all you have to do is show them the game. Like, let's say it's your friend who's an average gamer. He only plays AAA games from the big first-party publishers of like Sony and stuff. So he only plays those games. And you are a niche gamer who plays these obscure Japanese titles, and you want to share this this common thing with your friend. You want to relate to them on a closer level. So you're like, okay, come over to my place and we'll play some games I have. I want to show you something. I want to introduce you to something. And they'd be like, okay. And they show up, and then you're like, okay, do you play fighting games? The guy says, yes, I play fighting games. And you're like, cool, have you heard of Dead or Alive? And he'll either say, no, I haven't, or, yeah, that's the one about with like the hot girls, right? And you'll say, yeah, it's that one. So you would pop the disc in, or you would open the app, and you'll show them the game, and you'd be like, so yeah, these girls are really hot, right? And like whether, like, depending on what your friend says, like whether or not he cares about the fan service or not, you'd be like, yeah, these girls are really hot, but also on top of the girls being hot, there's a really good fighting game here. So here's something you can enjoy on top of another thing. So like you can have the solid core inside, and you can have the icing on the cake at the same time. And if your friend reacts like, oh cool, this is a really fun game, I'll actually play this and buy this, then that's awesome. That's how you appeal to the average gamer. That's how you do it. You, as the fan of the series, can introduce someone in an environment where it's okay to learn about the game and not be ashamed for playing it. If they say, it's not really my thing, like whether it's the gameplay is not for them, or like, don't really want to play as these sexy girls, then fine, you can drop it then, and it's no harm done, no chip on your shoulders, no nothing. You can just move on from there. Not everything is to everyone's taste. If you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one. That's a very common mantra I've seen lately. If you appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one. So what's happening with DoA 6 is the developers are they're the ones who are trying to push for a broader audience against the wishes of their core fan base, against the wishes of a lot of fans of their series. And they're doing that to try to appeal to these average gamers who either never heard of Dead or Alive or never showed any interest in Dead or Alive, and that's a big problem. If they never had any interest, then why do they think turning down the fan service will suddenly appeal to them? I don't think that's how it works. I don't think it's fair to the average gamer, and I don't think it's fair to the hardcore fan who bought every game, has his favorite waifus, and was looking forward to Dead or Alive 6. Men and women both. I'm not talking about Puritans who just like to complain about everything. When I'm talking about stigmas, I'm referring to normal gamers, fighting game players. Okay. It's a known fact that fighting game players are not brand loyalists. Like in one fighting game makes them buy different fighting games as well. I'll be happy to... see ya. Thanks for debating me. I had no one here to show up to talk to, so yeah, like thanks for at least being willing to debate me. That's a good job. I'll clap that. That's what I like. I like people who are willing to discuss things with me or debate things with me, even if I get abrasive against you. I appreciate that you stuck around to make some points. Like, that's commendable. So I'll give you points for that. So your conclusion is, I'm not talking about Puritans who just like to complain about everything. When I'm talking about stigmas, I'm referring to normal gamers, fighting game players. It's a known fact that fighting game players are not brand loyalists. Like in one fighting game makes them buy different fighting games as well. Okay. My rebuttal to that is that it's not true. There's absolutely a thread of brand loyalty in the FGC. And the best example to prove this is Capcom. Because of the history of fighting games, there is a huge core of fighting game players who only exclusively play Capcom fighting games and nothing else. Maximilian, who is the biggest FGC YouTuber, that's what he used to be many years ago. He was a Capcom exclusive fighting game player. He played Capcom vs. SNK 2. He played Third Strike. He played Marvel 2. Played Marvel 3. He was all about Capcom. And he himself admitted, yeah, dude, I never played games like KOF because I thought, KOF, I'd rather just play Capcom. That exists. That brand loyalty does in fact exist. Nowadays, it's lessened. And the reason it's lessened is because from the core of Street Fighter 2 bloomed all these other games, right? So there was this genre, and creators contributed to this market, this brand new market, and over time found what people liked and what people didn't like. And they eventually found their audiences, their niches, their demographics. They found their place in the market of fighting games. And those people, within those little communities, separate from Capcom, they increased their numbers as well, and the FGC grew. And that's great. The FGC grew because there was more competition, there were more fighting games, there was more variety, diversity, you could say even. So that happened. But that core of Capcom was still there because Street Fighter 2 was so influential for its time. It's still arguably influential today. They still had that core player base. And they still had a lot of people playing Street Fighter 4 back in the day. Nowadays, the brand loyalty is not as strong as it used to be. And the reason for that is because Capcom has been failing in the fighting game department. Like Street Fighter 5 Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, Street Fighter Cross Tekken. All these games were massive failures. Now, you look at Street Fighter V Arcade Edition and you think, well, they sold 2 million copies and they have an arcade edition now, and there are still people playing it for esports and stuff, and that's true, but there are a whole bunch of things you have to consider surrounding Street Fighter V's history. Excuse me. So the first controversy for Street Fighter V was they lowered the input frames required to get a move out. So no more one-frame links. They removed that from Street Fighter 4. And that scared some pro fighting game players. And then around that time, censorship hit Street Fighter V. So it was a big enough controversy that event hubs reported on it, and Maximilian talked about it, and his conclusion then was, I support your right to boycott this game if you want to boycott this game. That was what he said. If you don't want to buy the game because it was censored, then that's fine with me. That's what he said back in the day. Although I question his opinions on Dead or Alive 6, which is why I unsubscribed from him today, honestly, because I'm just tired of him. But that's another thing. So the censorship happened. That angered a lot of people, especially because it happened around the time Fire Emblem Fates and Tokyo Mirage Sessions were on people's minds. And it didn't help that Alex Valle tried to blame the ESRB for the censorship. And it didn't help when Yoshinori Ono came out and said, the reason we are censoring the females is because we don't want to offend people. Now, that means two things in today's context. I initially thought it was just feminists, but there's actually a second factor, and that's the eSports factor. So they wanted to go down the full eSports route, which is why they had the Capcom Pro Tour, and they have all these sponsorships, and they have all these sponsored players, and they have all this prize money. So they decided to push Street Fighter V as this like big esports title that would be put on TV, and they believed by censoring the women, they would not offend anyone who just happens to pass it by while watching ESPN. And you see this as well because of the broadcasting problems when pro players play as a character with a particular costume that they feel comfortable playing, but because it's esports, they had to capitulate to what everyone else wanted, not them personally, which is a massive shame. Pro players should be allowed to play the game however they want, including with costumes. So what resulted as well also is Street Fighter V's release, its initial release, was terrible. Like there was no arcade mode, there was no story mode, there were all these missing features, and the online was terrible. There was the 8-frame input delay. When you press a button, the action on the screen comes out 8 frames after pressing the button. There was that problem as well. So there was these whole host of problems that eventually led to Street Fighter V not selling that well. It took them 2 years to sell 2 million copies. And that's with the arcade edition update, which most people who owned the game downloaded for free, and very few people bought the arcade edition on top of that. It only barely passed 2 million in 2 years. Now compare that to Dead or Alive 5, which not only had 10 million downloads by 2017, but I'm pretty sure in 2016 or earlier in 2017 in that year, they had 5 million downloads. So there was this great increase on Dead or Alive where they had a lot of downloads, and they had even more over time without touching any of the girls or anything. They saw an exponential growth that was greater than Street Fighter V. And yes, it's because it was free to play, but it was a whole bunch of other things as well. It's not just the free to play aspect, I don't think. Then you compare Street Fighter V to Tekken 7, which sold 2 million copies in 2 months, and they have sexy female characters in it. Oh shit, I haven't even talked about Soul Calibur 6. I will get to Soul Calibur 6 in a minute. And Dragon Ball FighterZ sold 2 million copies in 2 weeks, in less than 2 weeks. So there are games that have exponential sales that Street Fighter V did not. So that's what, and because Street Fighter V had all these difficulties going in, and because there were a lot of people who were disenfranchised and did not like the esports push, like this sort of coup d'etat, you could say, of esports above the grassroots FGC movements. A lot of people didn't like that. So what they did instead, and people have admitted this, I read R Kappa, there are people who have said this. It's like, I used to play Capcom games. I loved the old Capcom games. I still love the old ones. But Street Fighter V left and Marvel Infinite left such a bad taste in my mouth, I decided to move to other games, and I'm now enjoying them. So Guilty Gear, Tekken, Blaze Blue, Under Night In-Birth, Dead or Alive even. So there are all these people that found themselves no longer being represented by the brand that they had loyalty to, and they moved away. That's what's happening with DoA 6 as well. They betrayed they betrayed the loyalty of people who supported their brand, and now those people are going to move away. They're going to leave that stuff alone. They're not going to touch the game. So yeah, Soul Calibur 6. And this ties into somewhat with my criticisms of Rufal manga, because he said, and I have a Twitter post on this, if anyone wants me to leave a link in the comments after this is done of my tweet compiling his Rufal manga's comments, I will do that if you want me to. In fact, I might do it anyway, just because I keep bringing it up. But he said that that he is sick. Actually, I'll pull it up. I'll read what he said. I will read what he said. Man, I've been at this for a while. All right, I'm just pulling up Twitter right now. Where is it? Oh yeah, there's this female artist called @naughty_devilhs, and I assume it's a woman, most likely. And she made fan art about Dead or Alive 6, and she says, "I feel your pain, DOA fans." So like, this is a woman who understands that people played the game because they like the fan service, and she has a fan art here that with Kasumi trying to move her boobs, and she's saying, "Come on, jiggle at least a bit." So women do like DOA. Never ever forget that. Women do like DOA. There are hardcore, dedicated DOA players who are women. Like their voice matters not because they're women, but because they're a person. Their voice matters too in this, and I think if they say, "I wanted the fan service," and now they don't have the fan service, what the hell? You should listen to them, because they are your kryptonite to use against people who say, well, women hate DoA, they think it's sexist trash. Okay. Here is the thread. Okay. Nope, hang on. Not that one. Here it is. So, Rufalmunga, I considered to be an SJW. And he said, I already told your weird creeps who want lingerie fighters can get lost because you are part of the reason why people look down on DoA, and I am actively glad you guys want to leave. I love the gameplay of DoA and always have, and am eminently glad that's the focus while shedding the dead weight of the past. Don't like it? Fuck off. That's a YouTuber, a fighting game YouTuber, said that to people like me. They told people like me who play fighting games and like DoA. I used to watch his videos. I watched his videos on Dragon Ball Fighters to understand how the game works, and that was his response to me. His response to me basically was fuck off if you want your sexy female characters to stay as sexy female characters. He told people like me to fuck off. Like that. And calling us creepy weirdos. Like, holy shit, dude. You want to talk about creepy weirdos? Well, I don't want to sound like a ginormous prick, but if you don't lose weight, you're going to die in 15 years. Just saying. Like, I don't live healthily, but I am nowhere near his size. So if we're going to talk about creepy people, well, sounds like projection to me. Just saying. Can I leave this in? Hang on. Here's what I'll do. I'll post it in the chat. I'll post this thread in the chat. So this is so you can read the comments for yourself. Head honcho says he sounds like he did it to a couple of kids in his lifetime. Oh, I'm not going to say that's true. I get that's a joke, but I don't want to be I don't want to be accused of slandering him because I don't think that's true. But I do think he's deluding himself if he thinks what he's doing makes him look better in the eyes of SJWs, or if he thinks it's going to get him female approval. If that's his goal, anyway. Like I won't presume I know what his goal is, but like fuck, dude, that's just. How do you respond to people like that? Seriously, like, like how do you respond to other fans like that? I'm baffled. I used to watch his content, but then after this shit, nah, no more. I can't support him for that. I do not agree with those views, and I refuse to give him my support for that. So, all right, now I can talk about Soul Calibur 6. I'm so sorry it took me so long to talk about Soul Calibur 6, but now Soul Calibur 6. Do you want to know what happened? Actually, can I bring it up? Yeah, fuck it. We'll do a bit more screen sharing here. We'll talk about Soul Calibur 6. Okay. Soul Calibur 6. Analysts want IV to be censored. Here it is. All right, can you all see that? All right, I assume you can all see it. SJWs want Bandai Namco to censor Ivy in Soul Calibur 6. This article came out before Ivy was even announced as a character. This was soon after the fact that the game was announced. This was not long after PlayStation Experience in 2017. And journalists immediately got on their ass and said, are you going to cover up the females to fall more in line with people's opinions about how women should be portrayed in the media because we want to move away from sexist stereotypes about women? And Okubo did the proper thing, where he laughed and told them, no, we have nothing to announce. And frankly, we're happy to just stick to what people want. We are happy to have, we are much happier to have original designs and to not change anything. And guess what? Ivy came out. Lots of people saw that she was still very, very sexy indeed. I didn't even think I liked Ivy up to this point, but man, am I a bigger fan of her now. Taki came out as well. They had you could break clothing in Soul Calibur 6 as well, just like in 5 and 4. And guess what? The fans rejoiced. The core Soul Calibur fans were unbelievably happy that they did not censor Soul Calibur 6. I was so happy that they didn't censor Soul Calibur 6. I was ecstatic about it. I thought it was fucking brilliant. Right? So why is DoA not allowed to be a fan service fighting game, but Soul Calibur is? It will do one even better. Shame developers. Fan service. We have another game that is not censoring itself in the face of media slander. Oh, sorry. SNK heroines. Fan service. I'm trying to look up keywords for the article. Sometimes you have to be a bit more, be a bit simpler. Come on, where is it? Fuck it. You get my point. There were the media would try to do to Soul Calibur and to SNK heroines, and even Kino Fighters 14. They even tried this on KOF 14. They tried to shame the developers into censoring the female characters. They tried to tell them our culture has progressed as such that sexy women are seen as problematic, and they use that word a lot. It's seen as problematic to have these sexy female characters portrayed this way. What do you have to say about that? And their basic response to that is basically, who gives a shit? They basically told him to get fucked because they recognize that those people who say that shit are not the fans of the series. Koei Tecmo does not do that, but Bandai Namco and SNK, they did. With KOF 14, I'm going through all these examples so that you guys can look it up and try to find these articles, because I can't pull them up right now because I don't I can't yeah, I don't have it on hand right now. But when SJWs complained, I think it was on NeoGAF, they complained, oh man, Angel's boobs are too big. This is bad. These look bad. You know what SNK did? They made Angel's boobs bigger after that. So that happened, and they made her boobs bigger. And nothing happened. The game released uncensored, almost worldwide uncensored, and nothing happened. The game had Mai Shiranui, it had Angel, it still had King looking really cool, had all these characters, all these female characters that had sexy outfits. Leona's another one. Leona's a fucking, oh, she's a fucking banger, man. She is fucking gorgeous. That happened and nothing happened. SNK Heroines came out. Controversy because it's a fan service game. That's what happens in this culture now. But guess what? They're sticking to their guns. And even NIS America, who were forced to basically say there will be no censorship because of the backlash from Criminal Girls 2. Good job, guys. Genuinely good job. They said, we're not censoring the game. This game will not experience any censorship. So why is that important? It's important because they only have as much power as you give them. If they try to shame you into censoring your female characters, all you have to do is say no. No, I will not listen to you. I recognize that you are not a fan of my game series. You never were and you never will be a fan of my game series. I will listen to my fans who tell me that they like the stuff. They tell me that they like my game and they like my fan service. And I'm just going to go about my business, creating what I want. And if you don't like that, you don't have to buy it. That's what Koei Tecmo should have done, and they haven't. They're scared of SJWs. That's why they're not doing that. Like, I don't blame them for being scared, because if I had a game where I was accused by the media of simulating real life sexual assault, holy shit, dude. That would fucking terrify me. Like the media, with all their influence and their power and their reach, are slandering me and attacking me and saying I support rape culture. Fuck. That's just horrible. That's not fair. Like, that's just completely unfair. I don't know why you would want to do that to someone. That's just fucked. Like, fuck. That's just fucked. It really is. So I'm gonna wrap it up because it's late and I want to shower and I'm starting to feel a bit ill. So here's some final thoughts. Dead or Alive 6 is not going to improve its sales. I don't think it'll sell well, personally. Or at the very least, I don't want it to sell well, because I want Koei Tecmo to see that a fan like me is being alienated because of their decisions. I want them to understand that I am a fan of Dead or Alive. I like playing fighting games, and I like fan service, and I liked how DoA gave me both. Whether it's in a spin-off title or if it's in the mainline series, I wanted both. To fucking microphone. I wanted to have both, but I wasn't given that because Koei Tecmo saw it as sensible to cater to an audience that doesn't actually play video games or if they do play video games, they were never interested in Dead or Alive. And if they were interested in Dead or Alive, they hated the fan service and wanted no one else to have that fan service. Core fans be damned. They will not stand you or anyone else enjoying fan service. They will not compromise on that. So, like with Valve saying we're going to allow basically any game on this platform minus a couple of things, they said, how dare Valve make this decision? They are shirking responsibility to curate games, to make sure nothing hateful appears on their platform. They should be ashamed of that. They need to censor those games. They need to take them away from us because we can't trust anyone to make their own decisions as consumers, to participate in the free market and make their own decisions, because we, the media and the SJWs, are more offended by that thing existing than letting people decide for themselves what they're allowed to do with their money. And it's the same thing with Dead or Alive 6, or Dead on Arrival 6, as the live stream is called. They are making a very big mistake by doing this. They are alienating men and women who enjoyed the fan service of Dead or Alive to cater to the eSports crowd, which I don't think is as big of a reason they're doing it, but it is a reason nonetheless. They're trying to appeal to people who refuse to accept DoA for what it is. And that's a terrible shame. Like, I don't think that's fair. Because they're communists, yes. SJWs are very much communists. Like, you very rarely see an SJW who actually likes capitalism. Because the problem with capitalism is it allows people to make their own natural choices. And the core tenet of communism is to deny human nature, because human nature is inherently oppressive in some way or another. And that's true, but it's also true that humans are inherently freedom oriented. They are inherently free. Humanity is, at its core, is a duality of freedom and oppression. And that's just a part of life. There are things that will hamper your freedoms that you have to combat or adapt to. Communists would prefer that they get rid of freedom, that they would prefer to get rid of freedom to destroy oppression rather than fight oppression in the name of freedom. Which is why you see SJW is going after fan services in video games. Okay, I am definitely turning off this broadcast now. Thank you, Novril Tataki, for providing a counter argument to the things I was saying. I'm very grateful you were willing to talk. If you wanted to talk in a like a proper debate instead of me just spouting this stuff to you, like by myself, you could DM me on Twitter. It's at Ebicentre. So it's with the British English spelling, not the American spelling. So it's not center, it's center. If you wanted to discuss this more with me in the DMs, or if you wanted to organize a live stream to talk about these things, or if you wanted to make a video response to me, that's fine too. I'll watch it and I'll respond to it, but it'll probably take a while because I actually have exams that are coming up and I need to focus on those. So I will be doing a lot of that for the rest of the month. and I also have a video I want to work on. So anyway, thank you, Head Honcho. He's my friend, by the way. Thank you, thank you to all. How many people watched this? Not a lot of people, I know. They'll watch it after the fact. Thank you all for watching. I'm sorry this dragged on for so long, and I was long-winded in a lot of my arguments. But if you care, I'll leave on this message. If you do not agree with Koei Tecmo's decisions regarding Dead or Alive 6, do not let anyone tell you that you're a bad person for speaking up. Do not let them shame you and label you as perverts because you accept DoA's identity as a fan service fighting game. Don't let anyone discourage you from speaking out. You have free speech for a reason. It's to allow you to say whatever you want. And if you feel strongly, like I do, about this game and this franchise, and you want to make your voice heard, then do whatever you want with the links I left in the description. I would encourage you specifically to look at the tournaments, the link for the tournaments, because I want people to see whether or not banning the costumes and therefore hiding DoA's identity increased or decreased the player participation rates, and whether or not the costumes had a significant effect, one way or the other. Please speak up if you care about this. That's all I'm going to say. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.